Matthew Daniels and his wife Anne lived in love and harmony for nearly 40 years. When they both retired, life in their city apartment started to feel monotonous and dull. No matter that it was a spacious apartment in the center of New York, they were weighed down by loneliness and melancholy. Therefore, by summer, they began looking for a country house to escape the boredom. Coincidentally, an acquaintance was selling a house in a remote location. They went, inspected it, and fell in love at first sight. The price was incredibly attractive, so they quickly closed the deal. The house was sturdy, with a sauna in the garden. Surrounding them were forests, rivers, and fields of cornflowers. The neighboring farm had fallen apart, and many residents had left, leaving only a few inhabited houses. But for Matthew and Anne, this was even better. They were tired of the urban hustle and bustle. Unfortunately, their little happiness in nature was short-lived. One summer day, Anne suffered a hypertensive crisis. It was so severe that she fell in the vegetable garden, losing consciousness and bleeding from the nose. Seeing this, Matthew fainted. He had been hemophobic since childhood, a condition that developed after his mother saved him from a pack of stray dogs by holding him above her head. Matthew could not provide help to Anne, and by the time he regained consciousness, she was already dead. His grief was boundless. Grieved, Matthew went to the cemetery the night after the funeral, dug up the grave, and took Anne's body. He returned to their country house and moved the body into the sauna. He tried to warm it by stoking the furnace, but the body remained cold. Gradually, his mind began to fade from sorrow. Matthew kept stoking the sauna non-stop until Anne's body turned into a mummy. Meanwhile, he found an old farm storage near the house and turned it into a crypt. He installed lighting, continued to burn candles, and by autumn moved Anne's body there, seating it in an old armchair. Every day he would sneak here, and sitting next to his beloved, he would talk to her. When the snow fell, to not inherit and not betray his gruesome secret, he stopped visiting. And then, with the cold weather, he returned to the city. But from time to time he visited, to check if everything was all right with the mausoleum, and of course with the house. Back in the city, in the empty apartment, Matthew Daniels soon began to suffer from melancholy and loneliness. It turned out that their only son with Anne had tragically died in his youth. There were no relatives with whom they kept in touch. He never liked drinking, so he wandered from corner to corner. After the New Year's holidays, he posted notices about renting a room. Soon, a suitable client was found. Rather, a female client, a girl who had come from the countryside. According to her, she was studying. At first, they seemed to have very trusting relations. Finally, a living soul appeared in the house. Matthew Daniels even started cooking for two and carried a TV to her room. But after some time, the elderly man began to notice that the student returned tipsy and smoked in her room, although they agreed right away that this was off limits. More so, boyfriends started to visit. She owed 2 months' rent. When the displeased Matthew cautiously threatened eviction, she just laughed in response. He went to the police, but they just shrugged. "You let her in yourself. You sort it out yourself. She's not breaking the law. And the fact that she's not paying, let the court decide who's right and who's wrong." When Matthew returned to the apartment, utterly upset, he heard knocks and fuss in his room. He had not installed a lock on the door from the beginning, showing how much he trusted his guest. Peeking in, he was stunned. The girl was frantically rummaging through his things, so much for gratitude. The man's eyes darkened with offense and anger. With a contemptuous look heading to the exit, she quickly stuffed something into her pocket. The man tried to stop her, but received a ringing slap. Enraged, he forcefully twisted the cheeky girl's arm and saw how large bills flew out of her pocket. Those were his emergency savings. A fight ensued. When Matthew came to and caught his breath, the girl was dead. But what now? Go explain everything to the police? He went into the room occupied by the tenant and saw 2 large trunks with belongings. So that's it. She decided to leave quietly. When he looked into one of the bags, he realized that she was not leaving empty-handed. There lay Anne's nutria fur coat. There was only one way out. After cleaning up, the elderly man dressed and went to the garage for his Chevy. At his country house, having lit the stove, he burned all the belongings and documents of the strangled girl. Afterward, leaving the body in the sauna, he didn't linger and returned to the city. He waited several days for someone to come looking for the girl, but no one ever did. He became interested in Egyptology, even learned a dictionary of hieroglyphs. For this, he spent hours sitting in libraries. He covered all the walls in his secret underground chamber with Egyptian hieroglyphs, not randomly but meaningfully. In the center of the crypt, he cast a symbolic sarcophagus out of concrete for two. For himself and Anne, the only close person in his fate. He set himself the goal to prepare for departure from this fleeting world in the manner of the Egyptian pharaohs, to be reborn into a happy and cloudless life in the afterlife, and the place where it all should happen, this crypt in the backwater of an abandoned village. Only, unlike the pharaohs, he prepared to surround himself at the deathbed not with bugs and cats. Matthew Daniels couldn't stand them, but with human mummies. There had to be 7. Not always, though, did things go smoothly. Once the investigative authorities closely scrutinized him, after the disappearance of first one, then another girl. It turned out that both had rented a room precisely from Matthew Daniels. His harmless appearance, and especially the diagnosis hemophobia, saved the old man. The investigators somehow immediately decided that such a godsend couldn't possibly be capable of murder, and they let him go with peace. Moreover, no other evidence besides the strange coincidence was found. He never talked about his country property anywhere, and the house was bought without any paperwork. When it came to finding the last 7th victim, fate presented the old man with a gift. He had not yet posted notices about renting a room when the tenant found herself. Returning from the store and approaching his entrance, he saw a pretty girl sitting thoughtfully on a bench. A large travel suitcase stood next to her. He had not seen her here before, likely a newcomer. Matthew Daniels was not a sociable, talkative old man. Quite the opposite. Neighbors even considered him excessively gloomy. But they understood he became like this after the death of his beloved wife. He would have walked past the modestly sitting girl on the edge of the bench. But suddenly, unexpectedly for himself, he stopped in front of her and inquired, "Good day, can I help you with something? Have you lost someone?" Saying this, he almost choked. A thought flashed in his head. "Why are you clinging to a young woman, old stump? Just go on your way." But there was something unusual about the quiet girl. Only he couldn't grasp what exactly. Long black hair, a tanned pretty face, a slightly bewildered look. Nothing special. Why then couldn't he just silently walk by? Well, now she'll mutter something like, "None of your business," and I'll move on. But to his pleasant surprise, the girl greeted him warmly and explained that she had just arrived from the station. She came from far away, and now pondering where to settle down for the first time. The hotel turned out to be too expensive. Probably she needed to look for a rented room. Does anyone in your building rent out accommodation? What luck. The prey runs towards the hunter, thought Matthew Daniels. Aloud, he politely offered, "If you don't mind, madam, you can occupy apartments at my place. 2 rooms are vacant. Choose any." And the girl happily agreed. She said her name was Betty. She lives at home with her mother. There's no father. Betty turned out to be truly modest. She chose the smaller room. It became immediately obvious that she was accustomed to cleanliness. She grabbed rags and a bucket of water right away. She cleaned her little room and also the old bachelor's kitchen. She offered to clean the other rooms for the old man, but he declined, although it was very pleasant. None of the girls who lived there before bothered themselves with such things. The old man and the girl lived in peace and harmony for a few days. The elderly guy kind of melted from her sincere care for the house and her friendly attitude towards him. At the same time, she looked so trusting and childlike that it seemed they had known each other for many, many years. Sometimes Matthew Daniels caught her somewhat bewildered look, as if the girl wanted to ask something but hesitated. Not wanting to weaken, he decided to hasten with the murder. Following a well-practiced scheme, he offered Betty to help on the country plot. His own health, he said, wasn't what it used to be. The girl happily agreed. The next day they went. Having arrived at the country house, Betty, without sitting down, immediately got to work. The old man's hands just fell. How could such a homemaker be wasted? He was about to give up on his wicked plan, but after drinking a glass of whiskey for courage, he didn't change his plans. Especially since to successfully complete them, it was only necessary to lay the last brick in the wall. Seizing the moment, Matt crept up behind the unsuspecting girl and put a noose around her. But whether it was from the whiskey or the sentimental thoughts that had not yet evaporated, he couldn't keep the victim in the right position. Betty twisted out, ending up face to face with the villain. The old man closed his eyes, not to look into her frightened, entirely childlike eyes, and with all his remaining strength, he finished his dark deed. Upon waking up, he habitually began to destroy the evidence of the crime, burning Betty's belongings in the stoked furnace. When he opened her purse and dumped its contents on the floor, his gaze fell on several black and white photographs and a sealed postal envelope. He was about to throw everything into the fire without looking, but he paused. Taking the photographs in his hands, he looked closely, and a shiver ran through his body. In all the photos was he, only younger by about 20 years. Next to him was a laughing, dark-haired woman, a passionate, fleeting romance with a girl named Mary. Matthew, although he was an exemplary family man, still remembered those golden days with a light sadness for a long time. He didn't leave his address to Mary. From the memories and the gradually emerging guess of what happened, tears ran down the old man's face. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope and read, "Dear Matthew, I remembered you all these years. Those 2 weeks were the best in my life because thanks to them, Betty was born, my daughter, and yours too. I never told her the whole truth about her father. And although I kept the photographs, I never showed them to her. But she accidentally found them recently. I couldn't lie anymore and answered all her questions. Please forgive me. Betty really wants to meet you. She's a lovely girl and so much like you, Matthew. I believe that you two will meet and become very close friends. Forever yours, Mary." A week later, a letter arrived at one of the post offices indicating the address of the apartment where the serious crime was committed. The letter was signed by someone, MD. When the police arrived for inspection, no one opened the door. They questioned the neighbors. They explained that an elderly widower lived in the apartment, but he hadn't been seen for several days. No lights in the windows either. They decided, just in case, to break down the door. When they entered the apartment, on the table in a visible place in one of the rooms, they found a tape recorder and a couple of cassettes. This confession was recorded on them, the story stretching over several years, and dictated into the recorder by Matthew himself. Although he never indicated the address of his country house, they still found it after some time. They discovered a crypt in a semi-ruined vegetable storage. The story dictated on tape turned out to be pure truth. When the detectives entered inside, they had to struggle to keep themselves in hand, both from the suffocating smell and from the nightmarish sight that presented before their eyes. Along the brick walls of the deep basement in a circle sat 6 mummified corpses. In the center of the room, inside a towering concrete sarcophagus, lay another mummy and 2 more recent bodies, an elderly man and a young girl. Forensic examination confirmed that the girl died from violent asphyxiation, the old man from poisoning with alcohol and formaldehyde. To the criminal case, in addition to the number, the police immediately attached the name Pharaoh, and that's what they internally called the main figure, while the investigation of all the circumstances was ongoing.